Hey gang, this is Marty, and it's good to have you all back with Moms Together. And we have certainly missed you over the last couple of weeks. And I have some things to share with you today that are to prepare us for the next semester. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year. And we're ready to get this new semester off to a great start. As you know, we are now done with the book by Hetty Britt's The Unnatural Mom, and we are moving toward another book called Parenting 14 Gospel Principles. And I want to share my screen with you, so let me go ahead and do that real quickly. And so our book this year is going to be around parenting the 14 gospel principles that can radically change your family. It's by a fellow named Paul David Tripp. And by the way, I love his glasses. I love his mustache. I love his entire look. Matter of fact, Laura would like me to look like Paul David Tripp. And yes, if you could look over at Laura right now, you would see her swooning over this look. There may come a day when I wear a scarf and a nice preppy sweater and really cool glasses that have sunglasses like this. I don't think my hair will ever be that shade again, but I could probably spiff it up a little bit. But in this book, there is a quote by Francis Chan talking about the book. Francis Chan is, perhaps many of you know about him. He's the author of the book Crazy Love. He's been a pastor. He's a theological teacher, an all-around great guy. He says, "This is the most meaningful book I have read all year. It is both theological and practical, a rare combination for a parenting book. For years, people have asked me to write a book on parenting, and after reading this, I'm convinced that I could never write one better than this. I am so glad I read this, but I wish I could have read it 20 years ago." Yeah, me too. After reading Parenting, I was torn. Part of me wanted to sit, cry, and confess all my failures as a parent. And the other part of me wanted to scream with excitement for the tremendous insight I now have to be a better parent. And, I feel the same way. When I first started reading the book, I honestly thought it was a bit dry. And I thought it was a little difficult to read at first. But wow, as I've gotten into it, the curriculum, the content is so incredibly rich. And I just highly recommend this book for everyone. Here are the chapters that are in the 14 Gospel Principles. And what you'll notice is that they don't connect with parenting very well. And that's because he comes from a theological background, and he is going to connect how we process our faith, how we process our theology as parents, and what does that have to do with our parenting? Now, some of these words and some of this language, you might think, I don't see the connection at all, but I'm telling you, there is gold in these chapters. The first section is about ambassadors, and the question becomes, what position do we put ourselves in as parents? Do we function as owners, or do we function as stewards? Are we ambassadors, or are we just trying to get our children to do our own bidding? What about our calling? What is God calling us to do? What about grace? What about law? Now you might think, law? What does law have to do with parenting? Oh my goodness. This was a very rich chapter in my mind. Inability, identity, process, lost, authority. Like, who is their ultimate authority? Foolishness. Wow. How do you get to the core of foolishness with your child? Character, false gods. False gods has a lot to do with like idolatry. And we can ask ourselves, what are the false gods in our own lives? What do we bow our own knees to instead of the Lord himself? Control, rest, and mercy. I personally like that chapter on rest. And but what you'll see is that if you look at our calendar of events for this year, and we don't have enough weeks to cover all this content. So we're going to have to double up on some of these chapters in order to actually accomplish all the content in this next semester. But I have a question, and that is, what function do our children have in our lives? What benefit do they bring? Now that might seem like a kind of a crazy question, but back in the days, if you look back years and years, and maybe not too many years, our children were to have a benefit to the family. I come from a Catholic background, and there's lots of people in my family who had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 children, and they lived on farms, and children had a function. There was an agrarian economy, and without having enough children, you couldn't really manage the farm. But how many of us today actually live on a farm? Most of us live in cities, and we don't have 40 acres to plow or 80 acres to plow or cows to milk and so forth. And so what is the function that our children have in our lives? And what benefit do they bring? Good question. Scripture talks about children being like arrows. And the verse that is always referenced is Psalm 127, verses 3-5. Children are a heritage or a blessing of the Lord, offspring a reward. So children are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born of one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Like the more children you have, the more blessed you are. And isn't it ironic that in this psalm, children would be considered to be an offensive weapon? I mean, what did you use an arrow for back in the days of Psalms? You used it for battle. So in a way, children are like weapons that are being sent. So God sent us our children. So in a way, children come into our lives like arrows. I mean, you can think about what your life was like before you had children. And my guess is there was a point in time in your adult life when you could just have a thought, hey, I'd like to go out and get some ice cream or hang out with my friends. You would grab your keys, maybe your purse, and then you'd take off. And it was as simple as that. You had the thought, and within 3 minutes, you were out the door. Well, it's not that way with children anymore. Children come literally with baggage, and there's strollers, and there's diaper bags, and there's toys, and there's loveys, and pacifiers, and milk, and playpens, and all kinds of things that we need to bring with us just to get our children from point A to point B. So children come to us like arrows, but they also go out from us like arrows. Children have impact. And I've thought, I wonder if the writer of Psalm 127 would have said children are like arrows if there had been missiles back in those days. I mean, sometimes I think children are like missiles. They certainly come into our lives, and they can be like a missile. They can really disrupt things. Sometimes children can be like Scud missiles not Scud missiles, that's a Maverick missile, being launched from an F-16. They have a direction and they have an intensity. And we've seen that in our own lives, and we can see that in the lives that they're going toward. I know for my own kids, now we have 3 adult children, and our youngest is in high school. And when our children go out, they make an impact. They change people's lives. It isn't just like an arrow. Their kindness, their goodness, Christ in them makes a big difference. And so I have this vision of all of us, if we were creating children who loved God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that when we all launched them all at the same time, that on the culture itself, it would be like we were carpet bombing our culture for Christ. And our culture would be changed as a result of all of the impacts that all of our kids were having on the culture. And honestly, this is one of my hopes and prayers is that our children coming through Moms Together, being a part of fellowship, wouldn't just be impacting the Franklin Brentwood area, but they would be impacting the world on behalf of Christ. That they would not be as afraid as I am of sharing the gospel, but they would be equipped and they would do it naturally, and that people wouldn't feel like they were being sold a bill of goods, like there was a salesman trying to talk them into Jesus, but that our children would have such a natural way of wooing and drawing people to want to hear their story of faith, that people would say, I want to know more about that. And that would be the way that they change the world. So what function do we serve in our children's lives? And this has a little bit to do with our identity. You know, when our children came into our world, we instantaneously changed. I remember the first time that we brought Bethany home. I think I was around 28 years old, and we brought her into the house. We put her up on our lime green Formica countertop in our first home, and she was in her little seat, and she was it was cold, it was February, and she still had all her winter garb on, and I was instantaneously afraid, because I was thinking, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what my function is. Do I pick her up? I can't play with her because she can't play. I can't feed her because it's not time to feed her, and Laura's taking care of all that right now. That's the time when Laura was breastfeeding, and I couldn't even do anything like that. So what function did I have other than to maybe change a few diapers and help Laura out along the way? Well, let's just talk about some of that. I mean, just think about what are the functions that you all serve in the lives of your children. I mean, you function like taxi drivers, and you're gospel tellers, you're Christ soothers, you're body washers, you're cleaner uppers, you're heart speakers. Your children love to hear your voice. You're thought engagers. And your desire is to lead your child to the arms of Jesus Christ. You're prayer warriors. You're cleaner uppers, craft makers, diaper smellers, and your faith talkers and God walkers. You're hand holders. You're a crazy person. You're hair rufflers, heaven stormers. You love to make your child smile. You care about your child's heart from the inside out. You hear the heartbeat. You look in their eyes and you respond to them. You do practical things like cut their hair, and you help them become beautiful from the inside and out. And they might not know it. They might think you're just playing baseball. But little do they know that you're a Christ follower, a hell prevailer, and that you're a daughter of the Most High King. Your life is focused on them. You are their safe, nurturing oasis. and they come to you to be nourished from your soul. And there's times when you just have to worship. These children come into our lives and they require so much, but ultimately we become changed from the inside out. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And the idea of training up a child means to shape them. So we shape them based on their bent. So like in the idea that we're thinking about arrows, you kind of, if you're gonna send an arrow out, you want that arrow to be straight. Our children do not come to us straight. Our children come to us not even rigid. They're not straight. They're not rigid. They are not meant to fly yet. But the whole idea is that we are to shape them so they can fly. But how do we do that? I mean, how do we take the curve of their life and straighten it out? How do we take those places where they're resistant and straighten it out? That's what our content is about in this next semester. So I want you to take a look at this diagram. This is a handout that we used last year in Moms Together. It was part of a book called Art of Parenting. It's by Dennis and Barbara Rainey, who are part of Family Life. And this arrow has actually been part of their parenting conferences for years. And I love the whole illustration of it. Now, it's not a perfect illustration, but wow, you can really uncover a lot of good stuff by using this diagram. Look at G, the bullseye area. What are your goals for your child? So today, after we get done with this talk, one of the things I want you to do is start thinking about what are the goals for your child. Now, there needs to be a little bit of an adaptation here, because when you are shooting an arrow at like a target, you've got the bullseye and then you have the outer rings. And the outer rings, it looks like you get less points if you hit the outer rings. But when you're thinking about a child, what you're really trying to do is hit multiple bullseyes at the same time. So you can imagine one bullseye behind another bullseye, behind another bullseye, behind another bullseye. It's like back years ago, people used to say that the goal was to love God, and then love your spouse, love others, and then do your work as unto the Lord. They had like all these priorities. Well, the whole idea wasn't that God comes first, and then after you've paid attention to God, then you pay attention to your spouse. And after you've paid attention to God and your spouse, then you pay attention to your children. It's not sequential like that. It's as you go, as you are loving God and loving your spouse, you're loving your children and you're shaping them and sending them out. It's as you go that you're trying to accomplish all these things. So for example, you could have a goal of teaching your children to love God with all their heart. You could have a goal of teaching your children to love others as they love themselves. You could have a goal of hoping that your children would learn to sleep through the night, or that your children would obey you the first time that you tell them to do something. Or you could have a goal that your children would speak to you in a respectful tone, or a goal that your children would memorize all the books of the Bible, or that they would be able to to declare the gospel and to be able to tell others about it. I mean, you could have lots and lots of goals. Sometimes your goals can be proactive. Like if you just have one child in your home and that child is young, your goals are all forward looking. But if you've had children for a while, now your goals are actually corrective. I mean, what do you do if you have a child who's lying to you? Or what if you have a child who's not doing well in school, or they've got some friends that are being bad influences on them? Well, your goals can be either forward looking or they can be looking in the rear, like based upon what's happened in the recent past. And then some of our children have a strong bent one way or another. So looking at the goals will be one of the things that we do as part of our lesson today. Also, I want you to look at areas A and B, talking about outside influences over the next 6 months and outside influences over the next 1 or 2 years. So what are influences on a child's life? Well, so you should probably write your name under each one of those. It can be friends, it could be coaches, it could be homework, could be an influence, or TV or media, social media. Could be your parents are having an influence. It could be there's a cousin who's having an influence. But there is something that grabs your child's attention. Right now, we have a grandson. His name is John Asher, and little John is not interested in a lot of things that, maybe a normal child would be interested in. But I'll tell you what, anything that looks like one of those toys that's like a popcorn popper or like a lawn, a grass cutter that makes popping noises, oh my gosh, he's just all over that. He will do anything to be able to play with that kind of toy. That is a major influence in his life. Another major influence in his life is getting enough rest. If he gets enough rest and if he's on schedule, that is a great influence. However, if he is off schedule, then that is a bad influence. He has a tougher day if he doesn't get enough rest. So I'd like for you to begin thinking about what are the influences. Can you name them? One influence, you can be a good influence, right? So for example, your kindness or your nurturing or your funness, the secure base that you have with your child can be a great influence. However, let's turn it the other way. Let's say that you're really busy, like you're always busy, and you're always behind, and your voice always sounds a little escalated, and you're frustrated, or maybe you're dealing with sickness, or maybe you're just tired all the time, or maybe this phase of your children is just really unnatural for you. Well, you need to be writing those down as being outside influences that could be making an impact on your child's life. Okay, so start looking at those. One thing, just while I'm pausing here for a second, the chemistry of your marriage can have an influence on your child's life. Now, I know not everyone is married that's in Moms Together, but for those of you that are married, the chemistry of your marriage can have a great influence on your children. If you have a marriage where your home is a battlefield and there's arguments, that's a certain influence. Perhaps it's a battlefield and you're just cold as ice towards one another. That's another influence. If your children start to understand that it's better to be out of the room when you and your spouse are together, That's an influence. Those are things you have to pay attention to, because the idea is that you want your home to be an oasis. Your home needs to be a place that you want to be and your children want to be. It really is an impact on you and your children if anybody in the family starts seeing home as a place to avoid. So just as I'm even saying these kind of things, what I need you to do is be writing notes on these, on your arrow, on the back side of your arrow. There's some places that you can write, and just become mindful of the kind of influences that are affecting your child in your home. You know, children come to us like an arrow, and we send them out like arrows, and we'll send them out to generations that we may never know. We may never see them, but our hope and our prayer is that they would come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ at a young age, and that they would be transformed from the inside out. And our prayer is that they wouldn't just be normal Williamson County or Murray County or Rutherford County kids, but that they would be extraordinary lovers of Jesus Christ. That they wouldn't be led astray by the things in popular culture that can lead them astray. You know, I look at this boy and I think, you know, by the age of 10, most likely, he will know something about pornography. May it never be. I look at him and I think, you know, somewhere along the line, he's going to start living a double life. He's going to tell one thing to his parents when another thing is true. May that never be. And even though if it does happen that way, may he have parents who know the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit can tune them in to when things are not right with their son. And here's the deal. None of us are perfect. We aren't perfect and our children aren't perfect. But we can strive to be more like Jesus every day. And so when I look at a picture of this boy, what I see him doing is looking into the eyes of Jesus Christ, saying, Lord, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. I am your ambassador in this world, and I love you. May that be true of all of us. May that be true of our children. Right now, what I'm going to do is end this video, and you have questions on your handouts, and you can start working through your materials in your small group discussions. Love you all. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.